Hey basketball players, today I'm going to be talking to you about your set point when shooting a basketball, how you can choose your set point, and how you can use it to your advantage over other players and the defenders. Let's get down to it. So set point is where basically you stop before you start shooting the ball forward. And what I mean by this is basically, for me, my set point would be right here where I've got my shoulder in line with my elbow to the rim, but also where the hand ends up being. So when I shoot that ball, I bring it up and I have it so that my hand makes an L, and it can, if I was to bring it back any farther, it would then come into my forehead with my just basically the L part of my hand. Now, other players will shoot differently, but this is my own personal shooting form. And I try to, this part I can move differently through depending on the situation. So if I'm a bit farther away from the rim, I'll bring it back a bit farther. If I'm closer to the rim, I'll be closer or higher up. And also if I'm covered by a player, this will be higher up because it's going to be leading to me having a faster release. But what can a set point look like? So there's so many different types. So there's Sean Marion in the NBA, or at least he used to play in the NBA way back when I was a kid, and his set point was right here and he would chuck it from his chest. Now he was 6'9", so it didn't necessarily get blocked all that often, but if you're a player, you probably don't want to shoot from there. It will probably get blocked. Another set point is one of Matt Bonner's. Now, Matt Bonner's set point is a bit different from a lot of other players. A lot of other players will like to shoot with the ball over their forehead or in front of their right eye or left eye, depending on if you're right or left-handed. Donyell Marshall and Matt Bonner, they both shot like this, and which is they shot beside their head. Now, Donyell Marshall, he changed his form a few times throughout his career, but Matt Bonner, he stayed the same. And that was the side of the head and then up. Now, everyone does have a different set point, and that one might work for you really well for a few different reasons. Number one, if you cannot, for the life of you, get your elbow underneath that ball, then this might be a good way of being able to navigate around that issue. Now, why could you not be able to get your elbow underneath that ball? Why is that a thing? Well, number one, if you're bigger like myself, or if you're muscular, what's gonna happen is there's fat or there's muscle underneath your arms or your back that's pushing you forward. LeBron James has this issue with muscle, I've got it with fat, but you start not being able to bring it under because of your size. Now for me, I'm okay. I bring it up anyways and I'm totally fine. I just go bang up and I'm good. But other players will have a lot of issues and they will not be able to shoot with that elbow getting underneath that ball. So being able to shoot beside your head might be a good option. Now, a lot of really good shooters, their set points are either right above their right eye or right on their right eye, or very close to it. And what I mean by that is a lot of very good shooters, they'll have that ball right here, right where that L from your hand can fit into your forehead. A lot of very good shooters shoot with that set point, but there's also some very good shooters who shoot a bit higher than that. So generally speaking, if you've got longer arms, if you're a little bit lankier, or if you're a center who's massive, then this may be the set point where you're going to be looking at, which is something like a Nikola Jokic or Boban Marjanovic, or however you say his last name. And their set points are a bit higher above their head, and it's almost like if their hand was to come down onto their head, instead of the L being able to fit like a cap hat onto their head, it would actually just sit on top. Now, the idea behind that, there's actually a couple of different reasons why they would shoot like that. Number one, they're centers or they're lankier players, which means that their arms are going to be a bit higher or longer anyways. So by bringing it a bit higher, it's going to be able to now fit into their shooting form to be able to get that elbow underneath that ball. Even though that elbow may be way out in front of that ball, it's still underneath when it comes to the plane or the line towards the basket. Basically, my biggest thing with players is trying to be as square to the basket as possible. Not every player can be square towards the rim, and what I mean by that is having your right shoulder, right hip, roughly the same distance as your left hip and your left shoulder to the basket. Now, of course, when you're shooting that ball, your body is automatically going to be pointing either left or right, depending on if you're right-handed or left-handed. If you're right-handed, your body's going to be slightly left. But the more square you can get that, the more straighter your shot's going to be. The farther out your shot is, the farther out your form is, the harder aim it's going to be, but the more power you're going to get from your shot. So keep that in mind. You need to make a good balance between those two. Something else I've not really mentioned in this video is your offhand. Some players will like to make a T with their thumbs and go up, and that's how I like to shoot. I like to make a T with my thumbs. They're not touching. If I had bigger hands, they would probably touch, but make a T and then you go up for your shot. Other players will like to have their hand in front of that ball. Now, the issue that I always come across with when that happens is it tends to have a little bit more push on the ball, and it tends to push the ball a little bit right. But not every player is like that. So you really have to pay attention, slow down your video footage, and see how you're shooting. Other players will make a T, but the opposite way of how I do it. So they'll come underneath the ball. And generally that's going to be more like players like Steph Curry, even though he doesn't necessarily come like that. He makes more of a square with his thumbs. He does have a thumb flick on his offhand, but when players make a T like this, that is going to be really having that really strong thumb flick, which is going to stop the spin on the ball and really cut down on how much arc you have on the ball as well. And my last tip I really want to give you is hands. What I really want to see is a little bit of space between your palm and the ball. What that's going to do for you is allow you to have more control over the ball. See how I can control the ball going sideways pretty quickly? Well, if I have it on my palm, I don't really have all that much control over it. So there are a lot of players who do shoot with their palm on the ball, but the issue is when they get hit in the air, if they get slightly fouled, that ball is going to miss. I would much rather have the control of your fingertips on that ball and still finish the shot and have a little bit more control over the ball when somebody was to hit you when you're in the air, over some of the more consistent shots that you can get. Possibly, it's not really proven all that well, but some players will get a little bit more control, or not necessarily control, but more aim of the ball if they have their palm on the ball. Not everyone's the same, but when you have your palm on the ball, one thing is consistent, and that is the ability for it to move when you get fouled. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing is to have your hand as wide open as you can on that ball, because again, that's going to allow you to control where that ball goes. I hope that this video has helped you shoot the basketball better. If it has, hit that like button, subscribe. I'll see you guys again next time.